Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Liam Exmouth, and first off, I'd like to say thank you for joining. This is going to be a powerful presentation, and I hope to bring it to you as quickly as possible. However, there's a great bit of information to cover, and so if you can, please click on the link in the description of this video here on Facebook. I've also posted this on my main page, on my main YouTube channel, and there's a link below that will directly bring you into my backup YouTube channel. Hello, KJ Martinez. Thank you for coming. This is going to be quite a thorough broadcast, so I hope you all can enjoy it as much as possible. So if you can click the link to my YouTube channel, you'll be brought to the information, and you can't really access the information to the fullest extent in which you should be able to if you were here on YouTube. But without further ado, we must continue. So for the first thing I'd like to share with you, it will be of this image of the rocket system's landing. This rocket system was designed by Tesla Industries under Elon Musk. This video is 57 seconds long. Some of the video will be skipped in order to avoid copyright infringements. This is a full-size rocket system that is being launched off supposedly into orbit. Now, I'm not going to doubt that there is space, and so let's all be very, very clear on that immediately. I apologize for any buffering you might be experiencing. Hopefully this ends quickly. Come on, don't be a jerk. Alright. So there's the rocket boosting system, and there's the rocket returning back after its launch to a sea platform. And if you look incredibly carefully, you can actually see the wake in the water off of the waves as the rocket booster restabilizes itself. Let's go back real quickly and see that again. So there's the wake. Boom. Splash. Boom. Splash. Now, this information here, this is, SpaceX monitoring this. This is the new industry. This is the new NASA, so that if NASA ever gets found to be completely fraudulent, they can quickly hand off the information and the data and the power to another corporation. Now, let me make it so you guys can see this a little better, hopefully. Okay, there we go. Now, the next thing we're going to cover is, well, if we just watched, and we'll do it again, if we just watched a space shuttle land on a platform after it was launching, you saw the size of the thing that was being launched off, and here it is again landing in the ocean. Here it comes down, coming down hard. Bam! Using advanced nanotechnology, using computer robotic intelligence and artificial intelligence, the platform and the rocket are in fact one brain system together working in harmony so as to know each other's subtle cues of behavior, what they're to be able to predict and analyze and react in real time to one another's behavior. So now they say they build these systems, but then they build these quantum intelligence systems to run and operate them. And the way in which the intelligence that they share with these things is a very high form of awareness. And we'll get into that, but that isn't entirely what we're talking about here today, ladies and gentlemen. What we're talking about here today is how NASA is faking the truth. Now, everybody is all caught up on this flat earth movement, caught up on this there are no trees on the flat earth movement. But what I'm mostly here to talk to you about today, and this video is going to be immediately launched into my other channel, is the fact that NASA for a long time, after having worked with Project Paperclip and the German individuals, the German parties, they adapted and adopted other governments' space intelligence programs. And those programs are written about by Jules Verne. Here we are in Wikipedia, and I think that this is the darndest collection of symbols right here. You guys can see that, right? Bam, the darndest collection of symbols. And what it says by Jules Verne. It says Jules Gabriel Verne, 8th of February 1828 to the 24th of March 1905. 1828 to 1905 was a French novelist, poet, and playwright best known for his adventure novels and his profound influence on the literary genre of science fiction. Now, he did a lot of different things, including writing a great number of books, not limited to the Voyages Extraordinaires. Journey to the Center of Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Around the World in 80 Days. Now, they suppressed his greatest novel, which is Around the Moon and Back. Now, we'll get to that shortly, but he had an opportunity to be well versed and studied with a lot of different areas of the world. Burns is generally considered a major literary author in France and most of Europe, where he had a wide influence on the literary avant-garde and on surrealism. His reputation is marked different in Anglophone regions, where he has often been labeled a writer of genre fiction or children's books, largely because of his highly abridged and altered translations in which his novels are often printed. Okay, we're going to check on the live on the YouTube and see how that's doing real fast. Okay. Thank you, folks who are watching. I hope you continue to enjoy this, and you will quickly gather what my point is. Very quickly, actually. We will check your comments in a moment. Now, he was trained to follow his father's footsteps as a lawyer, but he didn't really agree to that. And he quit that profession after actually coming to full college. You know, he fulfilled all the duties in college to become a lawyer, but he didn't want to do that. He actually became a scrupulous researcher. Adventurous novels that he wrote included, as I mentioned before, these here. But he his work, okay, we're going to talk about his schooling. His work is pretty much a direct result of his schooling and the experiences he took. Now, we know that places like the Vatican have held on to vast amounts of archived information, and they utilize this to their gain, both financially and civically, you know, and throughout war periods, politically. So, Jules was born in 1828 on a small artificial island on the Loire River within the town of Nantes. Okay, his parents were Pierre Verne, an attorney originally from Provence, and Sophie Alot de la Fouille, a Nantes woman from a local community of navigators and ship owners of distant Scottish descent. In 1829, the Verne family moved some 100 meters away to the number 2 Guy Jean Bart, and there he was sent to boarding school at the Place de Beauvais in Nantes. The teacher, Mem Sabin, was the widow of a naval captain who had dispersed 30 years earlier, and she used to tell tales that he was shipwrecked and he would return one day like Robinson Crusoe. And the theme of Robinson would stay with Verne throughout his life and appear in many of his novels, including The Mysterious Island and The Second Fatherland. Remember this here, The Second Fatherland. The School of Robinsons, and I say to remember that because do we all know who the first fatherland is? Okay. In 1836, Verne went on École Saint Stanislas, a Catholic school suiting the pious religious tastes of his father. Verne quickly distinguished himself in memoirs, recitation from memory, geography, Greek, Latin, and singing. In the same year, 1836, Pierre Verne bought a vacation house at 29th Route des Reformes in the village of Châtenay, now part of Nantes, on the Loire River. Okay, he continued to study. He also took vacations at Braines in the house of his uncle Proudet-Alot, a retired shipowner who had gone around the world and served as mayor of Braines from 1828 to 1837. Verne took joy in playing interminable rounds of the games of goose with his uncle, and the Booth the game and Booth the game and his uncle's name would be memorized in two late novels, The Will of an Eccentric and Robert the Conqueror in 1886. Now, we're just talking about his education, and then we're going to talk about his profound predictions that most would say these are predictions about the coming space age and the industries and the ideas that had to go into it, the engineering and the real implementations that became our space age were reflected in his writings. But those who would say that this is predictive of it, I beg to differ. This isn't predictive of it. This is actually an observation and a recording of events that occurred in a time period at around this time period brought on by the steam age. And the steam age was partially engineered. What came to the amazing thing that it became because checking here, see how it's doing. Because they were able to make advances in the industry that allowed them, when they got access to this hot air balloon system, they were able to fly off. And they had a hot air balloon that was comprised of different resins and synthetic materials that instead of exploding are melting or burning like the Zeppelin. It was capable of reaching a great altitude, so high that you would almost come to a place where gravity would become less effective. Now, I don't necessarily believe in gravity. What I believe in more necessarily is, we'll click back onto our page here now. What I believe in is magnetism and interlocking electrical magnetic relationships of large celestial bodies and small celestial bodies, because the micro and the macro both constantly reflect each other. Now, let's continue on. Verne went to École Saint Stanislas, a Catholic school suiting the pious religious tastes of his father. Verne quickly distinguished himself, and Verne recalled a deep fascination with the river and with merchant vessels navigating it. Okay, he also took vacations, and he snuck onto a ship that was set for the Indies, and that evening it stopped at Paimboeuf, where Pierre Verne arrived just in time to catch his son and make him promise to travel only his imaginations. It is now known that the legend perhaps is exaggerated, but we may not ever know for sure. In 1840, the Vernes moved again to a large apartment at number 6 Rue Jean Jacques Rousseau, where the family's youngest child, Marie, was born in 1842. Now, he he entered another religious school, the Petit Séminaire de Saint Donation, and because he was capable of distinguishing himself so frequently and so quickly, and this also had to do with his family. One second, please. This had to do with his families. The fact that they were participants of law school, and at that time you had to travel quite some distance to take these large seminar, like these finishing tests at the end, in order to become accredited. Is what the modern translation of that would be. He began his law school studies, and he married to Emile de DISNAY. Um, Oh, excuse me. His cousin, Caroline, you got to see this too, that he was in love with, was married on April 27th, in 1847, to Emile Desaulniers, a man of 40 with whom she would have 5 children. After a short stay in Paris, where he passed his first law exams, Verne returned to Nantes for his father's help in preparing for the second year. Sudden marriage sent Verne into deep frustration after because he fell in love with another woman, and she married a different man because her parents were uncomfortable with with her marrying a man whose future was uncertain. The sudden marriage sent him into a depression, and he composed. He wrote a hallucinatory letter to his mother, apparently composed in a state of half drunkenness, in which, under pretext of a dream, he describes his misery. This requited but aborted love affair seems to have permanently marked the author in his work, and in his novels include a significant number of young women married against their will, which included the work Master Zacharias and Matthias Sandorf, and A Floating City. That's another important reference to this entire, in the story that I'm presenting to you folks today. Now, my language skills always pick up a few minutes after I begin my broadcast, because I don't really practice these things, and I actually used to practice my broadcasts more, but I did rehearse this a little bit by reading this prior. In July of 1848, Verne left Nantes again for Paris, where his father intended him to finish law studies and take up law as a profession. He obtained a permission from his father to rent a furnished apartment at the 24th Rue des Anciens Commis, where he shared with Edouard Bonani, another student of Nantes origin. Okay, he also was staying with his aunt for a while. When Vernon arrived in Paris during a time of political upheaval, the French Revolution, making sure I think I missed you guys for a second here, but you're able to read what is saying on screen. Let's check what the size of this is like here for you guys real fast. Make it as big as I can for you guys, so you guys, if you need to, can read along. Sorry for that pause there. I hope you guys didn't miss too much. Okay. So, now, Verne arrived in Paris during a time of political upheaval. The French Revolution of 1848 in February, Louis Philippe the First had been overthrown, and had on the 24th of February a provisional government on the French Second Republic took power, but political demonstrations continued and social tension remained. In June, barricades went up in Paris, and the government sent Louis Eugene Cavaignac to crushed the insurrection. Verne entered the city shortly before the election of Louis Napoleon Bonaparte as the first president of the Republic, a state of affairs that would last until the French coup of 1851, in which Bonaparte had himself crowned ruler of the Second French Empire. In a letter to his family, Verne described the Boucard, a state of in June day's uprising, but assured him. So he went on to study for a while. Okay, I gotta watch the time here. He went on to study for a while, and he also, had a bunch of different experiences. He went on to develop his literary skills. Some of the first books he wrote about was A Voyage in a Balloon. And in that book, I was mentioning earlier that people were at the time studying and working in science in Germany and Austria and with steam powered and hydrogen powered engines to try to reach as high as they could in the sky with airplanes and all other types of things. Trust me, it's not even existing yet. Were no common airplanes. There were plenty of jet turbines, plenty of things, but you just won't hear about this. And I will be happy to speak on these events later, like these facts that I'm stating right now. But for the time being, we're creating this scenario, this atmosphere. So he he began to get to garnish an interest in writing material that had a lot of real scholarly science behind it. And at the end of this, fight that he was holding with himself and his father and his decisions of what he wanted to do, he then chose that he was going to go into, he was going to avoid accepting his father's Nantes law practice firm, and he was just going to go into deep scientific writing. And then some really great works began to pour forth. And in the pouring forth of these writings, he came up with a book in the future, not too far, about 1860, and this was 1862 of the voyage in the balloon, and then 5 weeks in the balloon, the adventures of Captain Hatteras. One of his good quotes is, however, he also noted the project was extremely ambitious. Yes, but the Earth is very large and life is very short. In order to leave a completed work behind, one would need to be alive. At least one would at least live to be 100 years old. Now, Hetzel influenced many of Verne's novels directly, and especially in the first few years. But time went by, and he eventually began to develop more of a sense of a cool attitude and an ability to not be so quickly tilted towards changing things in his book. And you can't miss the important one. Okay, here we go. From Earth to the Moon. This is where it gets good. 1865, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for watching so far. I do appreciate I do appreciate you having the chance to come forward and checking this out, but this is where it's about to get good, okay? This is where my language skills will pick up a little bit. From the Earth to the Moon is an 1865 novel by Jules Verne. It tells the story of a Baltimore gun club, a post-American Civil War society of weapons enthusiasts, and their attempts to build an enormous sky-facing Columbian space gun, the Columbia space gun, and launch three people, the gun's club president, his Philadelphian armor-making rival, and French poet, in a projectile with the goal of a moon landing. This was again written in 1865, I remind you. The story is also notable that Verne attempted to do some rough calculations as to the requirements for the canon, and considering the comparative lack of any data on the subject at the time, some of his figures are surprisingly close to reality. However, the scenario turned out to be impractical for safe and manned space travel, since a much longer muzzle would have been required to reach escape velocity while limiting acceleration to survivable limits for the passengers. Okay? So they would have had a longer muzzle in order to make the escape velocity high enough to leave the supposed atmosphere and the gravitational pull of the Earth, magnetism in other words, and also limiting acceleration to a survivable limit so that the passengers wouldn't turn into mush. The characters the characters of Michael Arden, or Buzz Aldrin, Michael Arden, the French member of the party in the novel, was inspired by the real-life photographer Félix Nadar. So they're already stating that these characters were inspired by real people. The story opens sometime after the end of the American Civil War. The Gun Club, a society based in Baltimore dedicated to the design of weapons of all kinds, especially cannons, came together with Embre's Barbicane. Its president calls him to report his latest idea. He's done some calculations and believes that they could construct a cannon capable of shooting a projectile, this projectile, to the moon. After receiving the support of his companions, another meeting is held to decide the place from which the projectile will be fired, the dimensions and materials of both the cannon and the projectile, and which kind of powder they are to use. An old enemy of Barbicane, Captain Nicole of Philadelphia, designer of plate armor, declares that the enterprise is absurd and makes a series of bets with Barbicane, each of them of increasing amount over the impossibility of such a feat. Here goes to the idea of, here's reference to the infinitely, exaggerating amounts of money poured into. I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit better angle here, okay? Give some love to y'all as I try, okay? This is a reference to the exaggerated amount of money that NASA has stolen from us. And then we go on to saying Stones Hill in Tampa, Florida is chosen as a site for the cannon's construction. There we go. There's a reference to Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center, predating Kennedy's placement in Florida by almost 100 years. Verne gives the exact position as 27 degrees by 7 northern latitude and 5 degrees by 7 western longitude. Of course, relative to the meridian of Washington, that is 27 degrees by 7 degrees north and 82 by 9 and 0. I hope Casey of Into the Stars gets to check out this one. It's a good video. The Gun Club travels there and starts the construction of the Columbia Cannon, which requires the excavation of a 900-foot deep, 270-meter and 60-foot wide, 18-meter circular hole, which is made in the nick of time, but a surprise awaits Barbicane Michael Ardun, a French adventurer, plans to travel aboard the projectile. During a meeting between Aldrin, the Gun Club, and the inhabitants of Florida, Nicole appears and challenges Barbicane to a duel. I don't know what this is reference to, but I know somebody else is going to. The duel stopped when Arden, having been warned by J.T. Maston, secretary of the Gun Club, meets the rivals in the forest where they have agreed to duel. Meanwhile, Barbicane finds a solution to the problem of surviving the incredible acceleration that the explosion would cause. Arden suggests that Barbicane and Nicole travel with him in the projectile, and the offer is accepted. In the end, the projectile is successfully launched, but the destinies of the three astronauts are left inconclusive. The sequel, Around the Moon, deals with what happens to the three men in their travel from the Earth to the Moon. Now, the technical feasibilities of a space cannon are followed. A 1903 publication on space travel, Kostinan Tsklaki refuted Verne's ideas of using a cannon for space travel. He concluded that a gun would have to be impossibly long. The gun in the story would subject the payload to about 22,000 Gs of acceleration. See formula, however, he was nevertheless inspired by the story and developed the theory of spaceflight. Gerald Bull Gerald Bull and the Project HARP prove after 1961 that a cannon can shoot a 400-pound projectile to an altitude of 180 kilometers or 110 miles and reach 32% of the needed escape velocity. Additionally, during the Plum Bob nuclear test series, a 900 kilogram or 2,000-pound capping plate made of steel was blasted away and never found. It has been speculated that the plate entered outer space because its speed was estimated to be between 2 and 6 times the escape velocity, but engineers believe it melted in the atmosphere. Okay, now we're going to jump back here to Around the Moon, which is the sequel to this novel. There's the firing of the Columbiad, that image predating the images found. Let's look at that real fast, give you guys a nice large image of that. Here it is. This is the firing of the space cannon. Okay, 1865. This is written. Can anybody remember that the moon missions were in the 1860s? I mean, 1960s too. Cough, cough. Reference, reference. We have been fooled by this elaborate theater, and not to say that we haven't been to space, but that we didn't go there during the time periods in which they said we did. We've gone there different times and for different purposes, and at the time in the 1960s, I'm sure Kennedy had been doing some good old-fashioned reading and said, "This is ridiculous. I can't believe they've been able to pull this over the eyes of the American people." I wonder if we can do it again. So, now back to the story. We're going to have to close up a whole lot of stuff real fast. Around the moon. This is where it gets even more mysterious. So, Around the Moon, written in 1870, Jules Verne's sequel to From the Earth to the Moon is a science fiction novel which continues the trip to the moon, was which only partially described in the previous novel. It was later combined with From the Earth to the Moon to create a trip to the moon and around it. Having been fired out of the giant Columbine space gun, the Baltimore Gun Club's bullet-shaped projectile, along with its three passengers, Barbara Kay, Nicole, and Admiral Ardern, begins the 5-day trip to the moon. A few minutes into the journey, a small, bright asteroid passes within a few hundred yards of them, but does not collide with the projectile. The asteroid has been captured by the Earth's gravity and has become a second moon. Knowledge of gravitational effects in orbit before there was ever such experiments are knowledge you just heard a second ago when the first time these things were experimented on. The three travelers undergo a series of adventures and misadventures during the rest of the journey, including disposing of the body of a dog out the window. Bam! Sputnik in the house. Suffering intoxication by gases. Dang! Tom Hanks making his play of Apollo 13 in the film. How did they how did they get away with such an elaborate theatrical staging of events? Very carefully, ladies and gentlemen. What were they doing all this time at the same time? They were propagating our control over our society and war. An illustration of from Jules Verne's novel Around the Moon, drawn by Emile Barrard, Alphonse de Neuville in 1872. Is that them in their chambers? Is that them mimicking NASA's astronauts? Doesn't this just seem odd? I mean, you can call it what you want to call it, but they don't fly these things on alcoholics. Just drunken, hallucinatory stupors, fits of rage and depression. Well, that's a tangent about his writing of a letter to his mother. I discussed that earlier. But anyways, the three travelers undergo a series of adventures and misadventures during the rest of the journey, including disposing the body of a dog out a window, suffering intoxication by gases, and making calculations leading to them briefly to believe that they are to fall back to Earth. During the latter part of the voyage, it becomes apparent that the gravitational force of their earlier encounter with the asteroid has caused the projectile to deviate from its course. The projectile enters lunar orbit, rather than landing on the moon as originally planned. Barbara Kane, Ardon, and Nicole begin geographical observations with opera glasses. The projectile then dips over the northern hemisphere of the moon into the darkness of its shadow. It is plunged into extreme cold, before emerging into the light and heat again. They then begin to approach the moon's southern hemisphere. From the safety of their projectile, they gain spectacular views of Tycho, one of the greatest of all craters on the moon. The three men discuss the possibility of life on the moon and conclude that it is barren. The projectiles to move away The projectile begins to move away from the moon towards the dead point, the place at which the gravitational attraction of the moon and Earth becomes equal. Michael Arden hits upon the idea of using the rockets fixed to the bottom of the projectile, which they were originally going to use to deaden the shock of landing to propel the projectile towards the moon and hopefully cause it to fall onto it, thereby achieving their mission. When the projectile reaches the point of neutral attraction, the rockets are fired, but it's too late. The projectile begins to fall onto Earth from a distance of 160,000 miles. Wow, that's a real distance to space. It's 160 to 175,000 miles. And is to strike the Earth at a speed of 115,200 miles per hour, the same speed at which it left the mouth of Columbiad. All hope seemed lost for Barbicane, Nicole, and Arden. 4 days later, the crew of a U.S. Navy vessel, USS Susquehanna, spots a bright meteor fall from the sky into the sea. This turns out to be the returning projectile, and the three men inside are found to be alive and are rescued. They are treated to lavish homecoming celebrations as the first people to ever leave Earth. Man, guys, are you following me? We're taking a brief second here to get back to the to the group and see like that there are nobody watching. Oh, well, I've tried. I've tried. I'm hoping you guys are catching this somewhere along space and time. Now, The next thing is here. Okay, we will go to Disney's secret space program.
They agree on. We know that Mars moves in an elliptical path around the sun, and it takes a little less than 2 Earth years to complete the trip. Since Mars travels almost twice as slow as the Earth, we can only observe the planet close up every 2 years. Mars occasionally comes as near as 35 million miles. We know also that Mars is about half the size of Earth, and its gravity is 1/3 as strong. Like the Earth, Mars rotates, and its day is approximately a half hour longer than our own. It has 2 tiny moons which revolve about the planet at great speeds. Also, like the Earth, its axis is tilted, creating the seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter. With the meager information that has been accumulated over a period of years, astronomers cannot draw too many definite conclusions about Mars. We realize there are probably certain unavoidable errors in our calculations, any one of which could make a big difference as to whether or not there is life as we know it on Mars.
For the past half-century, the intriguing possibility of traveling to Mars in a spaceship has challenged the imagination of many men. Rocket ships of all sizes and shapes have been designed, but most of them rely on an enormous consumption of chemical fuel to escape the pull of the Earth's gravity. A spaceship using electromagnetic drive to neutralize gravity is the obvious answer, but such a device is still a dream for the future. However, at the present time, an atomic-powered spaceship has been suggested by a leading scientist in the rocket and guided missile field, Dr. Stuinger, who for some years has been working closely with the rocket engineer, Dr. Werner von Braun. This electric spaceship features a revolutionary new principle that will make possible the long trip to Mars with only a small expenditure of fuel. Parts for this spaceship will be brought up to an orbit by conventional chemical fuel rockets. It will then be assembled in the vacuum of space. This ship will be 500 feet across and will carry a small landing craft for a final descent to the Martian surface. Located at the bottom is a small atomic reactor which furnishes a continuous supply of heat. This heat turns silicon oil into steam. After rising up a central pipe, the steam drives a turbo generator which produces electricity to run the ship. The steam is condensed in a giant circular cooler and used over and over again. In the thrust chamber, a platinum is electrically charged. The metallic element cesium is vaporized and blown through the white-hot grid. This ionizes the cesium atoms. They are then electrically blasted out into space at the rate of billions per second. This thrust pushes the ship in the opposite direction. The atomic electric spaceship can operate continuously for a period of years. At the top of the ship, away from the dangerous atomic reactor, is cargo space and quarters for a crew of 20 men. Mounted outside on the thrust chamber assembly is the auxiliary landing craft. When our ship reaches Mars, the landing craft will be released, carrying men and supplies to the planet's surface. A drag chute will gradually slow the landing craft as it streaks into the Martian atmosphere. A few seconds before touching down, the main rocket motors will be fired and the craft will land gently on its nose. Later, the exploration party can return to the mothership by blasting off in the tail section of the landing craft.
All right, YouTube, thank you very much. I'm back again. And, we're watching real fast. We're pulling up another video quickly for the moon landing hoax because, when they were on that space shuttle capsule, when they left the moon. Huh. No, what I want is right there. I gotta check some things real fast. I just want a certain part of this footage. Probably around here. This shouldn't take too long to locate. I am looking for the footage that shows. I can close this one too. Oh, you know what? I think what we're doing is we're watching the wrong video. Okay. Hopefully we can get the right one real fast. Can anybody in the chat, can anybody on YouTube tell me what I'm looking for? It's the name of when the astronauts left, when they had left the moon. Okay. Because I should be able to locate this footage pretty quickly. When the astronauts left the moon, they had to launch off. And I usually can find this. I'm not quite sure why I'm having a little trouble. I think it's because of the phrasing. Okay. You know what? I think I know what to do. Okay. No, not return. Departure. Let's see how that goes. I don't know. I just had a little brain fart. That happens sometimes. World stage. Taboo 77. Here we go. Thank you guys for your patience. It takes me a second to find things sometimes, but I work a lot and I try my best to find things for you that are very informative. So, any one of these, especially this one, this don't look right to me. There's one in the spotlight. He don't look so right to me. Well, put him up against the wall. Okay, now remember, to get off the Earth, you need this super large, massive, powerful fuel system. But the moon has a portion of the gravity required. At least you would need at least 1/6 of the amount of fuel. But instead, what was that? And it's even got cool music. Let's watch that again. And thank you very much for your patience. So keep watching. One more time. fakery. Did you see that thing? That was silly. I mean, silly. That's not how they did that. You want to? It probably looked more like this. And then after this, we will take a break, and I will start the barbecue. All right. See you guys afterwards for the second half of this. You gotta know the better part is what are they really doing, right? It's one thing to know what they've done, but what they're doing, what they're gonna do, that's a whole nother enemy, whole nother creature, huh? So, so I will certainly see you guys shortly, and in the meantime, we'll catch up with you.